Hey Chevra, what's going on? Welcome back to Babel on Talmud. Today we are studying Daf Yud Ches of Masechta Ayruvin, Daf 18. Today we are going to begin the second perek of Masechta Ayruvin. It's a pretty cool daf. It talks about Pasei, bayraos. These interesting kind of walls that you can construct around a well that is in the public area in the Rosh Hashanah. So to begin, right when the Gemara starts, we have a cute little machlokas over there, and then we get into some interesting agadatas. A lot of it will be chazara from Masechta Brachos, and then some of it won't be, and they're very interesting stuff. So, friends, let's jump into it. We are going to begin on Daf Yud Zayin Amud Beis at the sparkling new perek. Osin pasin leveyraos arba diyomdin nira kishmone divi Rabbi Yehuda. So remember, we've seen pasei bayraos a few times already. It's basically they would construct these wells in the Rosh Hashanah so that people who were traveling to Jerusalem for the holidays, they would have access to water. So they would construct these wells, and then around, now there was an interesting question though, which is that the well is 10 tefachim deep and 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim wide, so it's its own Rosh Hashanah. Now, if people are traveling in Rosh Hashanah and they take water from the well, which is a Rosh Hashanah, and they're standing in Rosh Hashanah, they can't actually drink this water for themselves, for their animals, so on Shabbos. So what they did was they created these interesting walls called Pasei bayraos, which from sort of a strict understanding of walls, they shouldn't work, because one of the rules when it comes to walls, as we know, is that it can't be parutz muba la'omin. There can't be more space than wall. The big chiddush by Pasei bayraos is it's actually almost entirely space, and still it works. And the way that you construct Pasei bayraos is that you basically create these 4 corners around the well. And in each of the corners, you have 1 amma in that direction. So meaning you can either have like an L shape in the corner. So let's just take the northern side of the well. So you'll have an L shape on the right side and an L shape on the left side, right? And you'll have 1 amma on the northern side coming in from the right and 1 amma coming in from the left. And now if we take, let's say, the eastern side, so then you got 1 amma from the top right, and you got 1 amma on the bottom right. And you basically have these L shapes that are 1 amma in each direction. And by having these L shapes in the corners, that is considered enough to be a wall. And you can now extract water from the well and put it in this enclosed area, and it's all one Rosh Hashanah, and that is acceptable, or at least it's all just Rosh Hashanah, and it's acceptable. So that's what we're talking about with these Pasei bayraos. So it's in Pasen leveyraos arba diyomdin nirin kishmone divi Rabbi Yehuda. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, so you create these Pasei bayraos, and you have 4 of these diyomdin. They're called diyomdin. The Gemara is going to explain why they're called diyomdin. It's for diyo, which means 2, amudin, which is beams. So, each one of these L shapes basically is representing 2 walls. So, you have 4 of these diyomdin, and each one of these diyomdin is keilu 2 walls. So, 4 of these diyomdin, nirim kishmone, they're like 8, because 4 times 2 for the 2 walls that they represent. So, that is how you create these diyomdin according to Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Meir Omer, shmona nirin kishnei masar. Whereas Rabbi Meir disagrees, and he says actually it's not 4 diyomdin, it's 8, and it looks like 12, because according to Rabbi Meir, and the Gemara is going to explain what the machlokas is in what context, but according to Rabbi Meir, you actually need the 4 diyomdin that Rabbi Yehuda has, plus another 1 amma, board in the middle of the wall. Okay, so you have the 4 corners, and each one of those is like an L shape, so each one is like 2 walls. So you have 4 times 2 is 8. Plus, in between each of these diyomdin, you would have another 1 amma thing, and therefore that adds another one for each wall. So it's 8 plus 4 is 12. Okay. Arba diomdin varba pshutin. There you go. That according to Amer, you have these 4 diomdin, and then 4 just regular slats in the middle of each of those 4 sides. Govan asar tvachim. Now the height of the diomdin is 10 tvachim tall. Virochban shisha, and their length or width is 6 tvachim, which of course is an amma. Okay. V'ovim kolshu, and their thickness is just whatever. It makes no difference. Uvenean kimloshte revakol shal shalosh shalosh bakar divrei mer. Now, how wide can the space in between the diomdin be? Right. So basically, these diomdin are these L shapes in the 4 corners. According to Meir, there's additionally, like another slat or something in the middle of each of these walls. Now, how much space are you allowed to have? Right. The big chiddush of Pasei bayraos is that though it's more space than it is these wall parts. So, how much space is there allowed to be? How much gap? So, Rabbi Meir says enough space for 2 teams that consist of 3 cows in each team, right? So, if you take 3 cows and you join them together to create 1 team of cows, so it's enough, so that you're allowed to have enough space between these diomdin that 2 of these teams, i.e. basically 6 cows, can fit over there. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, whereas Rabbi Yehuda disagrees with Rabbi Meir, and he says, Shel arba, that each team is actually 4 cows, okay? Kshuris v'lo mutaris, and they are tied, they are not free, and the Gemara is going to explain how come we have to point out that they're tied and they're not free. If they're tied, obviously they're not free. Achas nechneses v'achas yotzes, and the point is you can have 1 team of cows going into this area while you'll have another one leaving the area, and that way they can go in to get their drink and then leave. So you have enough space for that. Mutar lahakav leve'er, you can make these Pasei bayraos small, i.e. the area that they contain, a small area, you can get them close to the well. As long as there's enough space surrounding the well before the demarcated area of the Pasei bayraos, in between the well and the demarcated area, as long as there's enough space for a cow to get its entire head and the majority of its body into that area. Vishosa, and it should be able to drink. Mutter laharchik kolshu, and you can make the Pasei bayraos as large as you want. You can make it a really big area. Uvavad sheruba pasin, sheyarbe bepasin, as long as you're gonna increase these boards accordingly, right? So you can make this Pasei bayraos area as large as you'd like. However, remember, according to Rabbi Meir, there's a maximum gap area of 2 teams of 3 cows each, which the Gemara is going to explain is 10 amos. According to Rabbi Yehuda, there's a maximum of 2 teams of 4 cows each, which is a maximum of 13 1/3 amos. So the Mishnah is saying that you can increase the area of the Pasei bayraos, of this Rishus HaYachid, make it as big as you want, but do be careful to make sure that there is never going to increase more than the maximum gap area between these kind of boards that you're going to have to be adding to the Pasei bayraos to make sure that there's never larger than the maximum amount of gap. Rabbi Yehuda Omer ad beis sa'asayim. Rabbi Yehuda says, however, that there is a maximum area for Pasei bayraos, which is a beis sa'asayim, this 2 sa'a area. Amrulo, the rabbi said to Rabbi Yehuda, Lo amru beis sa'asayim ela legino l'karpaf. 1 second. This maximum of a beis sa'asayim is specifically in the context of a garden or a karpaf, right? Areas that are not specifically made for diur, for inhabiting. Aval, imaya, dir, osar, o muktzeh, o chatzer. However, if the area that we're talking about is a fold or a corral, it's like these areas that are made for animals, o muktzeh, o chatzer, or the area, or a backyard, or a front yard, kilu, areas that are made for living, because even as Rashi says later on, that even these areas for animals, the shepherd will sleep in these areas. So then, afidu beis chameshes koren, afidu beis asara koren, mutter. You can even have an area of 5 kor or 10 kor, which is a humongous, very, very large space, right? Meaning 1 kor is 30 sa'ah. So, whereas Rabbi Yehuda gives a maximum of 2 sa'ah, we're saying 5 kor or 10 kor. That's a lot. And these pasei bayraos, they're made for inhabiting, because the whole point is that people should be able to go there and drink there, and it's for people's use. So therefore, they're arguing against Rabbi Yehuda and saying that pasei bayraos should really have no limit to how large they can be. And then interestingly, the Mishnah seems to be repeating itself and says, and you can make the pasei bayraos as large as you want, as long as you add pasen, these boards, accordingly. Says the Gemara, so let's say that our Mishnah is not like Chananya. So our Mishnah is talking about these pasei bayraos, right? Putting these L-shaped corners around wells. So now, the thing is, our Mishnah is talking about wells. What's going to come up now is the question is going to be, is there a nafkamina between a well, which is has natural spring water, and basically you can assume that there's always going to be water there, versus a bore, which is a watering hole, which is, I guess, more, you have to fill it up, and there's not necessarily always water over there. So can you say that pasei bayraos works for a watering hole as well? So let's say that our Mishnah is not like Chananya. How come? Titanya, because we learn in the Brisa, Osim Pasen Livor, that you can make pasei bayraos also for watering holes. Now, if you want to create a reshus hayachid for like the caravans, like we were talking about for the past few days, so then you would actually have to make a real wall, albeit maybe a lovewood wall, but it would actually have to be a real wall. As far as we're concerned, it's considered enclosed. Chananya Omer says, Chananya chavadon levor avalo lepasen. Whereas Chananya says that even for a watering hole, you need lovewood walls. Okay, you have to make real walls. For a watering hole, you cannot use these L-shaped corners. So the Gemara wants to assume that since Chananya says that you cannot work with pasei bayraos for a watering hole, he must also assume that you cannot use pasei bayraos by a well, as our Mishnah says that you can. Afilu tema Chananya bor lechud be'er lechud. But the Gemara says, no, you can even say that Chananya would be in tow with our Mishnah, because even though Chananya says that you cannot employ pasei bayraos for watering holes, he very well might say that you can use pasei bayraos for a well. Those who basically say the same thing but slightly different, which is midlo katani Chananya omer osen chavalan levor ufasen leve'er, from the fact that Chananya didn't specifically say that whereas by a watering hole you need to have walls, but by a well you'd be allowed to create pasei bayraos. So michlal til Chananya lo shna bor v'lo shna be'er chavalan in pasen lo. So that must mean that from the fact that Chananya didn't explicitly say that you're allowed to use pasei bayraos by wells, it must mean that his opinion of requiring an actual wall for watering holes also applies to wells. To which the Gemara says, lo, not necessarily. Lema masnisin. I'm sorry, Chaval in pasen lo, lema masnisin lo kechananya. So therefore, the Mishnah must not be Chananya. Afilu tema Chananya lemai dika amr tanakama kamahadila. No, you can even say that the Mishnah, that Chananya can agree with our Mishnah, and he would say that you can create pasei bayraos. Well, then how come he didn't say anything about wells in that brisa? Well, he was just responding to the Tanakama. The Tanakama wasn't talking about wells. He was talking about watering holes, about bores. So Chananya said, no, when it comes to a watering hole, you have to create a wall. However, if the Tanakama would have asked Chananya about wells, Chananya may have said that you can use pasei bayraos by wells. So you can't. Initially we wanted to say that the Mishnah is not like Chananya, but the Mishnah could be like Hananya, no problem. Okay, so let's say that our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Akiva. The Tanan, as we learn in the Mishnah, Echad be'er harabim, whether it is a public well, uvor harabim, or whether it is a public watering hole, uve'er yachid, or a private well. Osin le'en pasen, you can do pasei bayraos, aval bor yachid osin lo mechitza gavo asar tfachim de Rabbi Akiva. But if it was a private watering hole, well then you need to construct proper walls according to Rabbi Akiva. So we want to assume that Rabbi Akiva is being a little bit too permissive, because whereas our Mishnah is only talking about wells and saying that by wells you can use pasei bayraos, doesn't say anything about watering holes, Rabbi Akiva seems to be saying that even by watering holes, as long as it's a public watering hole, so then you can use pasei bayraos. Now, the thing is that pasei bayraos are only relevant, they're only important because of the fact that there's access to water inside of them, right? You have this pit, you have this well, the well has water inside of it, so because there's water in there, so these interesting enclosures that we're creating around them with just these L-shaped walls become significant on account of the water that's inside, that they are enclosing. However, in the case of a watering hole, since watering holes can get dried up, so if there's no water over there, then the pasei bayraos really become irrelevant because they're not really serving a purpose. There's no water for them to enclose. So the thing is, Rabbi Akiva says that as long as it's a public watering hole, well, if it dries up, then people are going to let each other know, and everyone's going to kind of know not to carry in there. However, if it's a private watering hole, well, then word might not spread, and people might end up carrying in the pasei bayraos, so therefore you would not be allowed to construct pasei bayraos if it's just for a private watering hole. But for a public watering hole, it would be okay. So, right, so the Gemara says, "V'loacha katani the in the boros lo." Our Mishnah is only talking about wells. Our Mishnah says that for wells you can have pasei bayraos, but we have no indication to say that by any kinds of watering holes you would be allowed to construct pasei bayraos. Yet Rabbi Akiva seems to be saying that at least for public watering holes you can construct pasei bayraos. Afilu tema Rabbi Akiva. You can even say that Rabbi Akiva can be the author of our Mishnah because Ber Maim Chayim the Psikale Loshna Derab Loshna Diyachid Katani. Our Mishnah doesn't necessarily, the author of our Mishnah does not necessarily hold that constructing pasei bayraos for a public watering hole would be a problem. So how come our Mishnah doesn't say anything about watering holes? Because our Mishnah wanted to stick to the easier, kind of more straightforward, clear-cut case, which is wells. You're allowed to make pasei bayraos for wells, and that is that. When it comes to watering holes, already you have to say, well, it depends. If it's public, you can use pasei bayraos. If it's private, you cannot. So the author of our Mishnah wanted to avoid sort of the, trickier case, or the case that is not as clear-cut, and instead stuck with the clear-cut case, which is wells, that you can always create pasei bayraos for wells. However, when it comes to a watering hole, that the waters are gathered there artificially, that sometimes you could run out of water, and then it becomes more complicated. Our Mishnah avoided that, but our Mishnah could totally agree with Rabbi Akiva's opinion that public watering holes you can use pasei bayraos. Okay. Now the Gemara is going to try another attempt to say that our Mishnah is not like somebody, but in the end say that it could be. Let's say that our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava. Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava was one of the Asar Arugei Malchus, as was Rabbi Akiva. And the Tanan, as we learn in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava Omer Ein osin pasen ela lever arabim bilvad. Says Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava that you can only make pasen, a pasei bayraos, for a public well. But even by wells, you would not be allowed to make pasei bayraos for a private well. Yet our Mishnah says you can make pasei bayraos. You can make these pasei bayraos for, right, bayraos is plural, implying for public wells and for private wells. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava says you can only use pasei bayraos for public wells. So afilu temer Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, you can even say that our Mishnah is in line with Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava. Then how do you account for the fact that our Mishnah says bayraos, which is plural, which implies public and private? So my bayraos the alma. No, bayraos doesn't mean two types of wells, public and private. It means bayraos, wells in general. You can make pasei bayraos for wells in general, but those wells are only going to be public wells, if we wanted to explain our Mishnah like Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava. So basically, we brought three Tanaim, Hanania, Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, who each have opinions regarding pasei bayraos. We wanted to say that maybe let's argue that our Mishnah cannot be like these Tanaim, and in all three cases we explained how you actually can argue that our Mishnah is in line with their opinions. Now, my diumdin, what are these diumdin? Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah ben Elazar, dio amudin. Diumdin means two. Dio is two, amudin is pillar, is like beams. So it's like these two beams, like two walls, because it's an L shape and it's got like wall going in two directions. Now once we mention this dio thing, this two thing, well now we get into some interesting other two things. So now the Gemara has like this interesting mnemonic that if you're into mnemonics, feel free to use it. Dio limonada Shavach zunis niskalkal b'mida shlosha siman. Okay, you can use these things to remember stuff. Tanan, awesome. We learned over there in Demai, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, says Rabbi Yehuda, kol hashisin p'turin chutz min adiufra. So when it comes to shisin, when this came up in Masechta Brachas, shisin are very bad dates. Was it dates or figs? What do you guys think? Figs. It's very bad figs. So these very bad figs, you don't have to worry about demai. Since they're so bad, you don't have the Amaretz people who were concerned about maybe they didn't take meiser. They have no problem taking meiser from these figs because it's not such a big deal. Just take meiser and separate it. It's not like these are valuable anyways. Chutz min adiufra. However, these diufra bad figs would be relevant to demai, and you would have to separate your own meiser before you eat them. My diufra, what's diufra? Amar ula ilana osa dio peres bashana. It's a type of tree that creates, I guess, sprouts, fruits twice a year. That is this diufra. It creates two fruits or fruit twice a year. Okay, for those you'd have to separate meiser if you want to eat them or if you purchase them from an Amaretz. Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah ben Elazar, dio parts of ponim hayilo Adam Arishon. Adam Arishon was created with two faces, right? On one side was his face, on the other side was Chava. So Adam and Chava were basically created together. Then the Eibishter took a nice big axe and hacked them in half, and that's how Adam and Chava became individuals. Shnamar, as the pasuk says, Achor v'kedem tzartani, right? I created back and forth, i.e., Adam and Chava were merged into one, and then the Eibishter took a big axe and hacked them into two. Ksiv, the pasuk says, "Vayivan Hashem Elokim es hatzela v'gomer." So the pasuk says that God built up this bone into Chava. So Rav u'Shmuel, Chad Amar Partzav, Chad Amar Zonav. So it's Machlokus Rav and Shmuel. One said that, like we just said, that Adam and Chava were sort of created together and merged into one body. The other opinion is that Adam Arishon was actually born with a tail, and the Eibishter removed the tail from Adam Arishon and built that into Chava. Okay? Bishlam Mand Amar Partzuf, I understand Mand Amar who says that du Partzufin, that there were two God created them together. I understand then how it says that I created back and forth, right? It was one being with a front and a back that were different. But if you say that Adam Arishon had a tail, and God removed the tail and built it into Chava. So then what's Achor V'Kedem Tzartani? What does it mean that God created man with a front and a back? What's the whole story over there? No, it's something totally different. Achor V'Kedem is not describing Adam Arishon. It's not it kind of is, but not describing his physical makeup. It wasn't describing how the front of him was male and the back was female. No, all it's saying is that he was Achor L'Maaseh Bereshit. He was the last one created. Yet he's the first to get punished. So I understand what it means that he was the last to be created, because after all, he was only created on Friday, while the rest of creation was created in the days preceding. But what does it mean that he's the first to be punished? In what context? So it's not that he was the first to be punished by the agadatas, because in that case, the first to be punished was the snake, followed by Chava, followed by Adam. So in that sort of chain of events, he was actually the last. Rather, it's talking about the flood. The pasuk says, "Vayimach es kol hayikum asher al pnei ha'adama," that the flood sort of disintegrated all of the stuff that was on the land, from man until animal. So we see that man came first by the flood. I understand, according to Mandamar, who says that Adam was created with two sides, really. I understand why in creating Adam it says Vayitzer with two yuds, each yud representing a different side of the body. But if you say that Adam Rishon was created with a tail, so then how do you account for the two yuds? So Reb Shimon ben Pazi, Oili mi yitzri, Oili mi yotzri. It's like Reb Shimon ben Pazi says, woe is to me from my Yetzer Hara, and woe is to me from my Creator. Right? Woe is to me from my Yetzer Hara, that it prevents me from doing what God wants. Woe is to me from my Creator, who is going to take account because of my Yetzer Hara. And that's how you account for the two yuds, Yotzer and Yetzer. I understand according to Mandamar, who says, Du Partzufin. Now I understand why the pasuk says that God created them, male and female. Mamish, he created one being that was both male and female. But if you say that Adam Rishon was created with a tail, so what does it mean that he created man and woman? It was only man and tail. So rather it's like Rabbi Abo Rami. Rabbi Abo asked the following question based on seemingly contradictory psukim. On the one hand, Ksiv, Zachor Nekeva Baram. On the one hand, the pasuk says that God created Adam, male and female. Uchsiv, yet on the other hand it says, B'tzelem Elokim bara oso, that God created him in the image of God. 1 second. So on the one hand it says that he created male and female, yet it seems to be talking about only a male. What's going on? So B'tchila also machshava livros shnaim. So initially the idea was to create two, male and female. V'sof lo nivra ela echad. But in the end, all that was created was one, was just Adam Rishon with a tail. Okay. Once again, I understand the Manda Amar who says that two sort of sides were created. I understand then what it means, that after the Eibishter took his big axe and hacked them in two, so then he had to close up the open wound. But if you say that the Eibishter plucked off a tail from Adam Rishon and built that into Chava, so what open wound did he have to close? So well, there's still a little wound where he plucked off the tail, so you had to close that up. Alright, very nice. I understand according to Mandamar who says that Adam Rishon Taka had a tail. I understand that what it means that the Eibishter tried to build up this tail into a human being, into Chava. Elamanda Amar Partzuf Mai Vayiven. But if you say that Adam Rishon was created with these two faces, so what did he have to build up into Chava? Everything was Adam and Chava were both there already. They just had to be hacked in two. So what we learn out from Vayiven in that case is from like Reb Shimon ben Menashe, the Darsh Reb Shimon ben Menashe, Vayiven Hashem Elokim Esatzela, that the Eibishter built this bone. It means that after God, in this case, I guess, separated Adam and Chava, made them into two. So he then braided her hair and presented Chava to Adam Rishon. Because in the cities of the sea, they call braiding binyasa. So Vayiven is a reference to braiding, that Chava's hair was braided when Adam was finally able to see this person who was shared a back with him. Okay? Davar acher, Vayiven Hashem Elukim, or another way to understand it is that God built. Amar Rav Chizda v'Amar b'masnisa tana m'lam shebinoah Kadosh Baruch Hu l'Chava kibinyan otzer. Teaches that God built Chava like a storage house. Ma'otzer zeh rachav milamata v'katzu milamala k'dei l'kabel saperes. Just like a storage house is wider on the bottom and narrower on the top, so that it can properly accommodate the fruits that it is storing. So afa isha v'chav milamata uktzar milamala k'dei l'kabel sabalad. Also, a woman is wider lower down and narrower higher up, so that she can properly accommodate a baby. There's another interesting shot in Gemara Nida on Daf Mem Hey Beis that says Vayiven, that Melamed Shebina Yisera Yeshlo Leisha Miviish, that a woman has more intuition than a man. That's an interesting one. I don't wonder why they left it out over here. Vavi'ah Elo Adam, that the Eibishter brought her to Adam Rishon. Melamed She'asa Kadosh Baruch Hu Shishvinus Lo Adam Rishon. So it teaches that God kind of took care of Adam Rishon to make sure that he got married and he was leibedik. Mikan legadol she'aisa shushvinus lekaten v'ayera lo. So we learn from here that a gadol, a bigger person, should, an older person, should take care of the younger people to make sure that they get married and that it's leibedik and stuff like that. Parts of Heiminai Usagi Bereisha, very interesting question. So if you say that Adam Rishon was really created with two parts to him, so he was really only half him, but also half her, so who got to walk in front? Who got to see where they were going and make the navigation decisions? So Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak Mistarva de Zachar Sagi Bereisha. So Rav Nachman basically says, it would make sense to say that the man walked in front. How come? Titania, as we learn in the Brayso, well, a man shouldn't walk behind a woman. So, it makes sense then that the man was walking in front. Even if she is his wife. What if they're walking on a bridge? So, walk, besides her, to go around her. I guess if he gets to the bridge and there's a woman in front of him, so I guess you should speed up to try to go around her. Anybody who walks behind a woman in a river, there's no portion in the world to come. Alright, be careful about that. Taner Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, somebody who's like giving money from somebody who's giving money to a woman from his hand to her hand, or from her hand to his hand, just that he can look at her. Even if this fellow is similar to Moshe Rabbeinu, who received Torah from Mount Sinai, he will not be spared from the judgment of hell. And about him the pasuk says, Yad liyad lo yinaket ra, that hand to hand he will not be acquitted from evil. Lo yinakem midina shel gehenim, he will not be acquitted from the sentence of hell. Amar Rav Nachman, says Rav Nachman, Manoach amaretz hoya, that Manoach, the father of Shimshon was in Am Haaretz. Shneimar, the pasuk says, "Vayakum vayelech Manoach achrei ishto," that it says that Manoach walked after his wife. Now, as we just learned, that you shouldn't walk after even your wife, we said. So Maskef Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak takes, has a problem with what Rav Nachman said. El me'ata gabi Elkanah, tichsav vayelech Elkanah achrei ishto. What about Elkanah? That Elkanah was Chana's husband. It says that Elkanah walked behind his wife. Now, there are those who point out that actually this pasuk doesn't exist, so there may be a mistake in the text. But then it says, so would you say that Elkanah was an Am Haaretz also? The Gabi Elisha. What about the prophet Elisha? It says, Vayakom vayelech acharel, that by the Isha Shunamis, it says that he walked behind her. Hachinami, you can say that also he's an Am Haaretz because he walked behind the woman. No, ela acharei dvarei va'atzasa. No, what it means is that he walked behind her, not literally that she was in front and he was behind. It means that he took her advice and he walked, I guess, with her to where they had to go. So also by Manoach, it doesn't mean that he walked behind his wife. It means that he walked, he followed her directive. Amar Rav Ashi, L'madam Rav Nachman, Manoach Am Haaretz haya. So it says Rav Ashi, and that which Rav Nachman said, that Manoach was an Am Haaretz. Afilu beirav nami lo kara. Clearly, Rav Nachman. Oh, this makes more sense. Oh, this makes more sense. Okay, I thought that, when I was learning this, I thought that Rav Ashi was accusing Rav Nachman of not even reading Psukim. Which I thought was very strange because Rav Nachman was a very early Amora and Rav Ashi was a late Amora. So I thought it was very interesting that Rav Ashi would be criticizing Rav Nachman in such a severe way to say that he didn't even learn Chumash. But no, I don't think that's what he's saying. No, meaning, I think what Rav Ashi is saying is that based on Rav Nachman's opinion, that Manoach was an Am Haaretz because he walked behind his wife. Not only, was he an Am Haaretz, it means Manoach didn't even learn Chumash, if you take that Mahalach. Right? If you say that Manoach is an Am Haaretz because he, maybe it's his way of, maybe it's Rav Ashi's way of arguing on Rav Nachman to say that, it's hard to argue that Manoach didn't even learn Chumash. But, if you accept the Mahalach of Rav Nachman, that Manoach was an Am Haaretz because he walked behind his wife, so not only did he walk behind, not only is he an Am Haaretz, but he didn't even learn basic Chumash, right? The Chsiv, the pasuk says, by Rivka, V'atakum Rivka v'nayrosel, v'atirkabna al agmalim, that Rivka and her people, they got up and they rode on the camels, v'atilachna acharei haish, and they walked behind the man, v'lo lifnei haish. They didn't walk in front of Eliezer, they walked behind Eliezer, i.e., they avoided a situation where you'd have the man walking behind the woman. So according to Rav Nachman, it says that Manoach was an Am Haaretz. He didn't even learn, Psukim in Parshas Chayisar. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, says Rabbi Yochanan, achrei Ayruvin achrei isha, better to walk behind a lion than to walk behind a woman. Alright? Achrei isha v'lo achrei avodas kochavim, better to walk behind a woman though than to walk behind avodah zarah. Achrei avodas kochavim v'lo achrei beis hakneses b'sham shemispalin. Better to walk behind avodah zarah though than to walk behind a synagogue where they are praying and you are not joining them. Okay? Because that would look like you are denying God by not joining these fellows who are praying. Isn't that interesting? That all of those years that Adam HaRishon was in excommunication, I think maybe it was a self-excommunication during, or maybe not. What does Rashi say? It says Rashi, Benidoy, Sheyashav Mea Ushloshim Shana Nazuf Mipnei Shegar Bo HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That God got very, very upset at Adam HaRishon because he ate from the Eitz Hadas. So then, Vikillo, and it says that he cursed Adam HaRishon. So I guess Adam HaRishon, after this whole episode with the Eitz Hadas, he spent the next 130 years in excommunication. Holid Ruchen V'Shedim V'Lilin, and during this time, he gave birth to all sorts of spirits and demons. Isn't that interesting? Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Vayichi Adam shloshim u'ma'as shana, that Adam lived for 130 years. Vayoled b'dmuso katzamo, and only after 130 years did he give birth in his image. Michlad ha'idna lav b'tzamo olid, which implies that until now he didn't give birth in his image. Rather, he was giving birth to all sorts of spirits and demons and stuff. Meisvei. But one second, we have a kasha from a brayso. Reb Meir would say, Adam Rishon chassid gadol haya. Adam Rishon was a big chassid. I wonder what kind. Once he saw that death was introduced to the world because of his actions with the Eisadas, Yashav b'tainis me'u shloshim shana, he fasted for 130 years. Uferish min ha'isha me'u shloshim shana, and he separated himself from his wife for 130 years. Ve'ela zir zeiteinim abusaro me'u shloshim shana, and he put like fig branches on his flesh for 130 years as like a way of like, because he ate, according to some opinions, it was a fig branch, so it was a fig tree that he ate from, so he somehow made his life uncomfortable by wrapping fig branches around his skin. So on the one hand, we're saying that he was giving birth to like spirits and demons, yet on the other hand, apparently, he was completely celibate for 130 years. So the Gemara answers, when we say that he gave birth to spirits and demons even while being celibate, it means that came from the seed that he saw just like against his will, that just kind of came out of his body on his own. From that came these spirits and demons. From Rabbi Yirmiyah ben Elazar, and says Rabbi Yirmiyah ben Elazar, Miktas shvacho shel adam omen b'fanav v'chulo shelo b'fanav. It's a very famous Gemara, that we limit the amount of praise that we give to a person in their presence, yet when we are outside of their presence, when we are not in their presence, then we can go all out and really give lots and lots of praise to an individual. Miktas shvacho b'fanav, how do we know that in a person's presence we limit the amount of praise that we say about them? Because God, when he was speaking directly to Noach, he says, I have seen you as a righteous person in this generation. Kulo shelo b'fanav. And how do we know that when you are not in somebody's presence, you can really give the maximum amount of praise? That it says about Noach that Noach was a tzaddik tamim. He was a whole tzaddik. So, whereas when God was speaking to Noach, he says regular tzaddik, but when he's not in front of Noach, he says tzaddik tamim, a complete tzaddik. What does it mean that when one of the times that Noach sent out the dove, it came back with a olive branch in its mouth? The dove said before God, Ribono shel olam, Master of the world, I would much prefer to have my food be as bitter as raw olives. However, in your hands, I would rather that than have food that is as sweet as honey, but be given to me from a human being, in this context, Noach. It says over here in the context of, how do we know that this is what the that this is what the dove was saying? Because it says over here that there was a olive branch that was taraf b'fia, and it also says in the pasuk, "Hatrifeni lechem chuki," give me my bread. So hatrifeni is like referring to sustenance. So the dove was saying that I would prefer to receive bitter sustenance from you, God, than sweet sustenance from Noach. V'amar Rabbi Yirmiyah ben Elazar, kol bayis shenishmayin bo divrei Torah b'layla shuveinu nechrav. Says Rabbi Yirmiyah ben Elazar that any house that the words of Torah are heard in it at night, so it will never be destroyed. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, v'lo amar ayeh eloka usai no sins miras balayla. Somebody who's no sins miras balayla, somebody who has the beautiful tunes of Torah at night, so he will never say ayeh eloka osai where is the God who created me? He will never lose his house and be standing on the rubble of his house and saying, where is God? But if a person learns Torah at night, so then he will hopefully avoid that predicament. From the day that the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, it's enough for the world to use the name of God of two letters. Shenamar, as the Pasei says, that all souls will praise God with Ka, with Yud Hey. Right, in the Beis Hamikdash, the Kohanim would bless with the Shema Meforash, with Yud Kei Vav Kei. However, now that there's no Beis Hamikdash, so you do not have the Kohanim saying God's name of Yud Kei Vav Kei. So then, now everyone just praises God with Yud Hey. That when Bavel was cursed, well, also its neighbors were cursed. But when Shomron in Eretz Yisrael was cursed, well, its neighbors, that became a blessing for its neighbors. How do you know that when Bavel was cursed, so also it was a curse for its neighbors? Tichsiv, as the pasuk says, it will just be like a barren area for like these interesting creatures and waters, and swampy waters. I.e., nobody wants to live beside an area with interesting creatures and swampy waters. But Niskal Shomron is Baruch Hu Shchinei. How do we know that when Shomron was cursed, however, that was a blessing for its neighbors? The Chsiv, as the pasuk says, "V'samti Shomron li'asadet l'matoi karim." I will make Shomron. I will basically destroy Shomron. It will just be empty land, but land that can then be cultivated into beautiful vineyards and fields. So not having them there on account of the curse was actually beneficial for the neighbors who can now use that area. Chaver, that was daf Yud Ches of Masechta Ayruvin. I think it was a very beautiful daf, So let's discuss what we learned. We started the second perek of Masechta Ayruvin. We began with our discussions of Pasei bayraos, these interesting enclosures around around these wells in public land, public area. So we had initially talked about three opinions regarding Pasei bayraos, thought that maybe they would be inconsistent with our Mishnah, but found a way to resolve them and say that they could be in line with our Mishnah. They were Hananya, who says that at least by watering holes, you must have proper walls. The Havamina was to say that also he would say that Pasei bayraos wouldn't work by wells either, to which we say no, maybe just by watering holes. Hananya says you have to have proper walls, but maybe by wells he would agree, like our Mishnah, that you can use Pasei bayraos. Rabbi Akiva said not only wells can you make Pasei bayraos, but even by public water holes. So we wanted to think that maybe he was going a little too far, that our Mishnah would not allow public water holes, watering holes, only wells. So the Gemara says no, maybe our Mishnah could even include wells, can even include public watering holes, just that it's stuck with wells because it's the more straightforward opinion, i.e. because all wells you can make Pasei bayraos for, whereas when it comes to watering holes, then you have to get into more details. Depends if it's public or private, so it avoided it, but not because the Mishnah necessarily has anything against public watering holes. Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava said that you can only use Pasei bayraos for public wells. And then we said that it's possible that you can explain our Mishnah to say also as a reference to public wells. Then we got into all sorts of interesting agadatas. We had a discussion that we had largely encountered in Masechta Brachos about Adam Harishon. Was Adam Harishon both Adam and Chava together, or maybe just a male with a tail? And then we got into some other interesting Gemaras about Adam Harishon giving birth to like all sorts of interesting demonic kind of things. And very famous Gemara of Miksas Shvachol Shel Adam B'fanav V'chulu Shelo B'fanav, about giving limited praise to a person in his presence or in her presence. However, outside of his person's presence, to maximize your admiration for this individual, and other interesting agadatas. Chaver, I hope that you enjoyed Daf Yud Ches of Masechta Ayruvin, and I hope you enjoy your day or night or whatever equally as much. Peace.